honestly still feels surreal seeing my car like this. It was white before, but this is actually all completely repainted in a Mazda white, Mazda pure white. So I've owned this car for about 4 to 5 years now, and it's always been really rough and the paint's been really bad. I've never quite been happy with it. And when it ran out of car inspection sometime at the end of last year, I was on the verge of letting it go, and I put it up for sale. And I had a few offers, but in the end, I don't know, this is my dream car, so I just couldn't do it. But before we get into showing you more around the car and what I've done, I had to do a few things first before we could get to this stage. I kind of did everything the opposite way around of how I normally like to do things and how I think people should. It needed a car inspection, so it needed to be mechanically ready and fit for the roads here in Japan. At that stage, it had yellow fenders, yellow side steps, yellow rear fenders, unpainted wing, unpainted bumper, and it just looked like a mess. With big thanks to my wife, Manami, we took on the stupid task of trying to get it ready for the road and paint it all within one weekend. We kind of did it. I mean, we didn't order enough paint, so we were a day late, but we got it done. So I painted it this Mazda pure white. We just did it here ourselves, so it's not perfect, but from what it was before, like I'm over the moon, and it still doesn't feel like it's my car. Because I've always wanted Arashiyama Aero on an FD with a GT wing from them too. Honestly, I've searched for literally years since I owned this car to find these fenders and side steps. I mean, they are available new, but I didn't want to quite spend that much on the car that I'm tracking. So finally, I ended up winning some after losing countless auctions. I got them in the end. So it's got that Aero-wise. It's got this front bumper, which is kind of like a similar design to a factory one, but like with a bigger front canard, which I think looks pretty cool. Arashiyama bonnet, which came with the car. Arashiyama GT wing. Stock rear bumper. I feel like the rear kind of looks a bit like something's missing. I don't know if I should put a diffuser or do something with the rear. Let me know what you guys think, or if you like it as is. I mean, I'm kind of in two minds about it. And then I also put on the wheels that actually came with this car. They look like an Advan wheel, but they're from another maker. They don't look bad, but I do want to change them up at some stage just because I don't really like the sizes and I want to run something genuine on this car. So the next step after we made this thing look all super pretty was to actually get it mechanically sound for sharking, which with having a modified car here in Japan is kind of a pain in the ass. They're super strict on emissions, height, and a whole lot of other little finicky things. So here's the things I needed to do on this car to make it pass for the road here in Japan. So I need to open up the bonnet anyway, so I'll show you what I changed on the inside. In Japan here, if you want to run a bucket seat and have it all legal for the road, it either needs to be a bride or a Recaro and it have paperwork to go with it. And if you're running a bride, you need to have a bride seat rail, or vice versa. If you have a Recaro, you need to have a Recaro seat rail. Otherwise, you can be turned away and you have to put your factory seat back in. This car came with a bucket seat, but it never had any paperwork or anything like that. With the price used stock seats are, it was kind of a no-brainer for what we get these from for a bride for, just to go for a new bride bucket seat. And I'm super stoked with it. It's so much more rigid than the old one and way more comfy than like a 30-year-old seat with no padding left in it. And these are a really nice touch on the new ones, I think. They're having the leather here, so it doesn't get all ripped up on the side. Super stoked. And you can even run a Hans on it too. And then this is another item you need to run. If you're still having passengers in the back, you need to have this foam protector, or if you register your car as a two-seater, you don't need to run this. But yeah, that's another kind of special Japan thing in terms of getting a car on the road. I don't know if you guys have seen the interior of this in any of my other videos, but I've kind of tidied it up a little bit. Finally, after years, I put a boot on the shift knob. It's an aftermarket leather one. I think it looks really nice. Changed the shift knob as well. Impulse, so it wasn't really a Mazda thing, but it feels good and it's kind of a nice height and I like it. And then have a horn that's working too finally. So that's all legal. I just picked the cheapest horn and it sounds kind of funny. And coming into here, So in Japan, emissions and noise is a big deal. And for an RX-7, they come factory with this thing here called the air pump, which basically sends air into the catalytic converter, or pumps air into the catalytic converter. And this is required if you're running a stock one or a air pump type aftermarket catalytic converter. If you do decide to run an aftermarket catalytic converter, it does need to come with paperwork. So most of the new auctions, most of the used auctions don't come with that paperwork, so they're kind of useless. And I already had the stock one, so I just put that back on and put the air pump back on, and emissions ended up passing. So I was very, very happy about that. Another thing I did was put on this mega muffler. Look at the size of this thing. And this did the trick for keeping it quiet enough for roads here in Japan. A couple of other points they're super strict on is the tires can't be outside the fender. And they basically have like a radius measure where they drop a piece of string down to see if at any point of the radius that they've kind of decided on, it will, if it's digging out from there. And if it's in, you're good to go. And this was all legal and okay because I have a over fender on it, but if I didn't, it'd be way out. And then another thing it failed on first time was it was a bit too low. Like the whole car was sweet, except for on the very end of the exhaust, because it's so big, it was like literally 5 millimeters too low. So I had to end up going back home and just raising up the rear a little bit. The exhaust also, it had a small exhaust leak in the flange in the gasket. So ended up getting a new gasket, putting that together, and then that was all okay. First day I went, I kind of knew I was going to fail on a bunch of stuff, so it was kind of more of a go there and see what you need to do, just because it hasn't been in 2 years and it's an old car, so you kind of never know. Some of the preventative things I did before was basically just replace all the grease boots in the suspension. There were some with cracks and bits and pieces like that, and it's really not worth it if I had to go and order the parts and then go and get another temporary number plate for this car, which I had to do. Ordered those from Mazda. They came in like a couple of days anyway, and those were all done. And then yeah, basically the next day I was able to finally get Sharkin after it not having it for a few months and kind of just sitting in the garage and just being a storage shelf, basically collecting dust. So it was honestly a lot of work in the time frame we had, but I'm so glad I painted it before we got Sharkin, because now I've actually got a little bit more motivation just to drive it around normally, whereas before it really looked like junk. So without going to the circuit, I didn't really want to drive it too much. So stoked on that. And to celebrate, we ended up taking this car to Arashiyama, which is a super famous spot in Kyoto. We went to the kind of tourist spot with the temples and all the street food and stuff first, just get a snack and finally eat properly after a few days of eating konbini food. And then after that, there's a super cool road there. They do like time attack events here. I think they do it almost every year. And there's a lot of popular car meeting spots there as well as non-car related things for people that are doing camping and stuff like that. But we weren't too interested in that. Went up there, had a nice chill day, took some photos, and finally relaxed for a little bit after not only all the work on this and then all the work just in our normal lives. It was a super good day out, and I think we need to do it more often. But yeah, as always guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you like the new look as much as I do. And hopefully next time I do a video on this, we get to take it out somewhere and actually have some fun with it. All right, see you later.